In 1997, after the death of Diana, Princess of Wales in a car crash in Paris, public attention quickly turned to her will. Diana's personal estate was estimated to be worth between £17 and £21 million. However, as the contents of the will gradually became known, many people realized that the decisions she made were far more complex than they had expected. Some details in the document even sparked debate that continued for years afterward. So what exactly did Diana write in her will? And who ultimately inherited her fortune? Let's break it down. The life of Princess Diana, from fairy tale princess to global icon, Diana. Princess of Wales was born on July 1, 1961, at Althorpe House in Northamptonshire, England. She came from the aristocratic Spencer family. Her father, John Spencer, 8th Earl Spencer, belonged to one of Britain's oldest noble families. While her mother was Frances Shand Kidd, Diana's childhood was not as privileged as many imagined. When she was young, her parents divorced after a difficult marriage. Diana and her siblings remained with their father. Friends later recalled that she often felt lonely and struggled with confidence during her school years. In 1977, Diana first met Charles III, then the Prince of Wales. At the time, she was only 16. A few years later, their relationship developed, attracting growing attention from the British press. By 1980, Diana, then 20 years old, was working as a nursery school assistant in London when the royal courtship began. On July 29, 1981, Diana married Charles at St. Paul's Cathedral in London. The wedding was watched by approximately 750 million people across the world, making it one of the most viewed televised events in history. Diana's wedding dress, with an 8-meter train, became one of the most famous garments in royal history. To the public, the story looked like a fairy tale. Diana quickly became one of the most admired figures in Britain, yet behind the public image. The marriage soon began to struggle. By the early 1990s, the relationship between Charles and Camilla Parker Bowles became a major royal scandal. In 1992, leaked recordings of private conversations between them appeared in the media. The scandal became widely known as Camillagate. During this period, Diana began speaking openly about her emotional struggles. She revealed that she had suffered from bulimia for years. She described the condition as a response to the intense pressure of royal life and the growing collapse of her marriage. The turning point came on November 20, 1995, when Diana appeared on the BBC program Panorama. In the interview, watched by millions, she spoke candidly about her life inside the royal family. At one moment, she said a sentence that became famous around the world. "There were 3 of us in this marriage." The statement created shock throughout Britain. In 1996, the marriage between Diana and Charles officially ended in divorce. After leaving her formal role within the royal family, Diana began shaping a new public identity. Instead of withdrawing from public life, she became increasingly active in humanitarian work around the world. Earlier moments had already hinted at her global appeal. In 1985, she famously danced with John Travolta during a gala dinner at the White House. The image quickly spread across international media. Diana also developed a close friendship with singer Elton John, but her most significant impact came through humanitarian advocacy. In 1987, Diana visited a hospital in London and shook hands with an AIDS patient without wearing gloves. At the time, many people still believed HIV could spread through simple physical contact. The image of Diana calmly holding the patient's hand circulated worldwide and helped challenge public fear and stigma. A decade later, in 1997, Diana traveled to Angola to raise awareness about landmines left behind after the Civil War. Wearing protective equipment, she walked through a partially cleared minefield to highlight the danger faced by civilians. The photographs from that visit spread across global media within hours. By the mid-1990s, Diana had developed a public role very different from traditional royal figures. She spoke directly with patients, refugees, and vulnerable communities. She often broke formal royal protocol, choosing empathy and physical contact over distance. Some within royal circles viewed her approach as unconventional. Yet to millions of people around the world, Diana represented a new kind of public figure, one who used visibility and emotion to draw attention to humanitarian issues. By the final years of her life, Diana was no longer simply the former wife of the Prince of Wales. She had become one of the most recognizable and influential women in the world. And it was during this period, after the end of her marriage and the transformation of her public role, that Diana began making serious decisions about how she wanted her legacy to be protected in the future. Those decisions would soon take shape in a document that later attracted global attention: her will, humanitarian work, turning personal pain into global action. After her separation from Charles III in the early 1990s, Diana, Princess of Wales, began focusing much more intensely on humanitarian causes. The end of her marriage brought intense public scrutiny and personal isolation. Instead of retreating from public life, Diana redirected that experience into advocacy for people facing stigma, illness, and poverty. Her approach differed sharply from the traditional distance maintained by the British royal family. Diana believed public visibility could force society to confront issues it preferred to ignore. She used her global fame to draw attention to humanitarian crises. One of the most influential moments came in April 1987. Diana visited a ward treating AIDS patients at Middlesex Hospital in London. At that time, fear and misinformation about HIV were widespread. Many people believed the virus could spread through casual contact. During the visit, Diana shook hands with an AIDS patient without wearing gloves. Photographers captured the moment. The image appeared in newspapers around the world within hours. The gesture challenged a powerful stigma. It showed that compassion and normal human contact were safe. Medical experts later noted that the visibility of that moment helped change public attitudes toward HIV patients across many countries. Diana continued visiting hospitals and AIDS clinics throughout the late 1980s and early 1990s. She met patients privately, spoke with doctors, and supported organizations working to improve treatment and public awareness. Another major campaign emerged during the final year of her life. In January 1997, Diana traveled to Angola to highlight the danger of landmines left behind after civil war. Millions of mines remained buried across the country, injuring or killing civilians long after the conflict had ended. During the trip, Diana walked through a cleared path inside an active minefield while wearing protective equipment and a visor. The images circulated globally. Television networks broadcast footage of her moving slowly across the field, guided by demining experts. The visit dramatically increased international attention on the issue of landmines. Later that same year, governments from around the world signed the Ottawa Treaty, an international agreement banning anti-personnel landmines. Over the following decades, millions of mines were removed or destroyed in former war zones. Diana's humanitarian work extended far beyond these two campaigns. She visited hospitals treating leprosy patients, shelters for the homeless, and orphanages in several countries. She met children affected by war and families living in extreme poverty. Many of these visits were quiet and received little media coverage. Her involvement often brought immediate attention to organizations that previously struggled for funding. Charities connected to her campaigns reported dramatic increases in donations after her visits. Some critics within royal circles believed Diana's activism attracted too much publicity. At times, her humanitarian trips were described as attempts to gain attention after her divorce. However, many humanitarian groups saw the opposite effect. Diana's presence often brought urgent global focus to issues that governments had ignored for years. By the mid-1990s, she had become one of the most visible advocates for humanitarian causes in the world. Her work influenced public attitudes toward HIV patients, landmine victims, and marginalized communities. These experiences also shaped the way Diana began thinking about the future. She understood that media attention would eventually fade, but financial resources could continue supporting these causes long after she was gone. That realization played an important role in the decisions she later made about how her wealth and personal assets would be managed in her will. Writing the will the moment Diana took control of her future. In July 1996, shortly after her divorce from Charles III was finalized, Diana, Princess of Wales, made a decision that would later attract worldwide attention. At 35 years old, she began preparing her official will. The document was drafted while Diana was living at Kensington Palace in London. Her life had changed dramatically during that year. The marriage that once defined her public identity had ended. She was no longer a senior working member of the royal family. For the first time in years, she had full control over her personal finances and legal decisions. Her estate at the time was estimated at around £17 million. Most of it came from the financial settlement she received after the divorce. Additional assets included jewelry, personal belongings, book royalties, and various investments accumulated during her years in the public spotlight. Preparing the will was not simply a legal formality. For Diana, it was a way to decide what would happen to everything she had built and protected during her life. According to accounts from people close to her, Diana reviewed the document carefully and insisted on making several decisions herself. She wanted clear instructions about how her assets should be handled after her death, and who would be responsible for carrying out those instructions. At times, the process became emotional. Friends later said, Diana understood that a will was essentially a voice that speaks after death. It allowed a person to continue making choices even when they were no longer present. There were also suggestions from royal advisors about how certain parts of the estate should be structured. Diana, however, chose to keep control over the final decisions. She approved the document only after she felt confident that it reflected her wishes. By the end of that summer, the will was formally completed and signed. At the time, the document attracted little public attention. It was simply one more private legal record among many within royal life. No one could have predicted that just over a year later. The world would begin examining every detail of that document. When Diana died in August 1997, the will suddenly became one of the most closely discussed legal documents connected to the British royal family. And once it was opened, people began asking the same question. What exactly had Princess Diana decided to do with her fortune? The will and the role of Paul Burrell. Who controlled Diana's legacy? When the will of Diana, Princess of Wales, was examined after her death in 1997, it revealed a carefully structured plan for the future of her wealth and personal possessions. Diana's estate was estimated at about £17 million, including money from her divorce settlement with Charles III, jewelry, personal belongings, and various investments, rather than leaving these assets in a simple transfer. The will organized them through a system designed to preserve and manage the estate over time. A significant portion of the estate was directed toward charitable causes that Diana had supported during her lifetime. These included organizations working with AIDS patients, victims of landmines, and vulnerable children around the world. The remainder was placed into a structured financial arrangement intended to support her family in the future. But one of the most striking decisions in the document involved the person chosen to help carry out her wishes. Diana appointed her longtime butler and confidant, Paul Burrell, to play a central role in handling many of her personal belongings. Burrell had worked closely with Diana for nearly 10 years and was considered one of the people she trusted most inside her household. After Diana's death, Burrell helped organize and catalog a large collection of her personal items. These included letters, clothing, jewelry, and gifts she had received during her years as one of the world's most photographed public figures. Some items were later sold through auctions and charity events. raising millions of pounds that supported causes connected to Diana's humanitarian work. Other belongings were preserved as part of the historical legacy surrounding her life. However, Burrell's role soon became controversial. In 2002, he was charged with theft after it was alleged that he had taken several hundred items belonging to Diana from Kensington Palace. The trial received intense media attention. Burrell argued that Diana had trusted him to safeguard many of the objects after her death. The case collapsed dramatically during the proceedings, and Burrell was cleared of the charges. A year later, in 2003, he published the book A Royal Duty. The book described his years working for Diana and included personal stories about her life inside the royal household. Some members of the royal family strongly criticized the publication, arguing that it revealed private information. Supporters of Burrell, however, believed he was trying to preserve Diana's memory and defend her legacy against criticism. Over time, Burrell became known as one of the few people who had direct access to Diana's private world through interviews, public appearances, and the preservation of her belongings. He continued to shape public understanding of her life. The structure of Diana's will ensured that her estate would not simply disappear into royal institutions or private collections. Instead, it allowed her personal wealth, possessions, and story to remain connected to the humanitarian causes she had championed during her lifetime. Even decades later, the document continues to influence how her legacy is managed and remembered. And yet, for many observers, the will raised another question that remained partly unanswered. Did Diana leave behind more than what was publicly revealed? The alleged shadow trust, a controversial theory surrounding Diana's will. In the years after the death of Diana, Princess of Wales, numerous rumors and theories began circulating about whether her will contained additional private arrangements that were never fully disclosed to the public. Some commentators suggested that Diana may have created a secondary financial structure, sometimes described in media speculation as a shadow trust. According to these claims, a small portion of her wealth, sometimes estimated at around £2 million, was allegedly intended to support humanitarian causes that operated independently from traditional royal institutions. However, it is important to note that no verified legal documents have ever confirmed the existence of such a trust. Official probate records connected to Diana's estate do not mention any hidden financial fund beyond the arrangements publicly reported after her death. Despite the lack of formal evidence, the theory gained attention because Diana had already shown a willingness to act independently from royal expectations. During the final years of her life, she openly supported causes that were sometimes politically sensitive. Her campaign against landmines, for example, placed her in the middle of an international policy debate. The images from her 1997 visit to Angola helped accelerate global pressure that contributed to the signing of the Ottawa Treaty banning anti-personnel landmines. Because of this pattern, some observers believed Diana might also have structured parts of her estate to continue supporting independent humanitarian work after her death. The discussion occasionally resurfaced in connection with later events involving her sons, Prince William and Prince Harry. Both princes have supported charitable foundations and social campaigns in the decades following Diana's death. Harry, in particular, has often spoken about continuing his mother's humanitarian legacy. Still, historians and legal experts emphasize that most claims about a hidden trust remain speculative. Without documentary proof, they remain part of the broader mythology that grew around Diana after her death. What is clear, however, is that Diana carefully structured her will to ensure her wealth would continue supporting causes she believed in. Her decisions reflected the same priorities that defined her public life: humanitarian work, independence, and long-term impact. Whether or not any hidden financial arrangement ever existed, the discussion itself highlights something important. Even decades later, people continue searching for signs that Diana had planned one final way to influence the world after she was gone. Royal reactions and the global impact of Diana's legacy. The death of Diana. Princess of Wales, in August 1997, created one of the most emotional public responses in modern British history. When the details of her estate and personal belongings began circulating in the media, reactions inside and outside the royal family quickly followed. Within the royal circle, the handling of Diana's possessions became a sensitive issue. Much of the controversy focused on the role played by Paul Burrell, Diana's former butler, because he had access to hundreds of Diana's personal letters, photographs, and private items. Some members of the royal household believed too many personal details about Diana were becoming public. Tensions increased when Burrell published the book A Royal Duty in 2003, describing his years working for Diana. The publication drew criticism from royal supporters who argued that private memories should remain confidential. Burrell defended the book by saying he wanted to protect Diana's reputation and tell her side of the story. Public interest in Diana's death remained intense for many years. In 2007, British authorities concluded a long investigation into the crash in Paris that killed Diana and Dodi Fayed. The inquiry determined that the crash was caused by reckless driving and paparazzi pursuit rather than a conspiracy. Even after the investigation, debates and speculation continued in public discussion and media coverage. Meanwhile, Diana's legacy began to expand globally through the humanitarian causes she supported during her life, shortly after her death. The Diana, Princess of Wales Memorial Fund was created to continue funding projects connected to her charitable work over the following years. The fund helped support campaigns addressing HIV/AIDS, poverty, and humanitarian crises. Her influence also remained visible in the international movement against landmines. The Ottawa Treaty, signed in 1997 by more than 160 countries, banned the use of anti-personnel landmines. Many activists credited Diana's public advocacy for helping bring global attention to the issue during the final year of her life. Diana's childhood home, Althorpe House, also became an important location connected to her memory. Visitors from around the world traveled there each year to see exhibitions about her life and humanitarian work. Her legacy also continued through her two sons, Prince William and Prince Harry. Both princes inherited financial support through the arrangements created in Diana's estate. As adults, they began developing charitable initiatives that reflected the causes their mother cared about. William later became closely involved with the Diana Award, a charity created to recognize young people who demonstrate leadership in humanitarian work. Harry also frequently spoke about the influence his mother had on his life. In 2023, he described her impact in his memoir, Spare, explaining how her approach to compassion and public service shaped many of his own decisions. Over time, Diana's life story became larger than the controversies that surrounded her marriage and death. Her public actions helped change attitudes toward HIV patients, landmine victims, and marginalized communities. Her willingness to engage directly with people in need challenged traditional expectations of royal behavior. More than 2 decades after her death, Diana remains one of the most recognized humanitarian figures of the late 20th century. And for many observers, the choices she made in life and the decisions recorded in her will continue to shape how her legacy is understood today.